Hey guys, so today we are going live for our garden class, and I'm just going to have you guys on until everyone gets here for the class. And so you'll be muted probably for maybe 10 more minutes, and then the garden class will start. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Okay, I'm just testing if everything is working, and it is, so I'm going to probably turn you guys off, but I'll show you a few plants first. And if you're rewatching this, you can skip the part that you'll have to wait until the class starts. So the class is probably going to start in 10-ish minutes. So if you're rewatching this, you might have to skip forward 10 more minutes. But this is kind of what all the flowers are looking like. We also have other things for sale. Lots of plants. Okay, I'll turn you guys back on whenever the class starts. Thanks for coming in, Tammy. I appreciate it. Also, later in this video, well, actually, like after the garden class, I'll put Jill and Ariel's social medias on in the description box. So go check them out and support our local gardeners. up.
Hi, I am Jill from Heimsoft Farm.
I'm Ariel with Grace Roots Gardening.
And we're here to talk about gardening today. And I'm going to let Ariel be the leader.
You're the leader. And
Yeah.
we're talking about summer gardening
Yep.
specifically. So what is your favorite summer thing to grow?
Tomatoes. Everybody loves tomatoes. They're so satisfying, and they are like the gift that keeps on giving.
Do you have a favorite tomato?
I like yellow, the big yellow slicers, like the Dr. Weich's or the Kellogg's Breakfast.
Oh, it's just my all-time favorite.
Is it?
That flavor on them. Have you done them before? They're like a really big yellow beefsteak, and they're like a darker yellow than the Dr. Witchies or Dr. Weich's, however they say them. But they're a little bit deeper, like a more golden kind of color. But just the flavor on those, and like a BLT or just
incredible.
They're super good.
Yeah. And then I just like, as far as cherry tomatoes, it's the sun sugar. It's a good one. It's one of my go-tos. Is it? I have all 3 of those varieties.
I did the black strawberry ones last year. They were on the Baker Creek cover, and they're like a really pretty, like dark purple and blue and pink fruit. They're super cool, and then the flavor on it is just really good.
Yeah, the atomic grape that was on the cover of Baker's Creek, I don't like those at all.
I don't like the flavor of them.
They taste terrible. I don't understand how they've sold more of those than anything. And then they're beautiful.
They look cool.
Yeah, they look cool. Yeah. But the hard thing is if you don't know when they're perfectly ripe, because they are like so many colors, and you're like, what color is it when it's totally ripe? So like I ate so many like underripe ones that weren't ready, and then also they split, like so much splitting.
Yeah.
So.
I did. What were they? Tigerellas last year, and had a horrible time with those. They're a really pretty variegated, like almost like a saladette tomato. They're not a cherry tomato, but they're not a slicer, and they split so bad, like all the time. Like the skin on them would just split, and we got one day of heavy rain, and they all split, and then the flavor on them wasn't good. They were pretty, but just the flavor wasn't great.
Yeah, and it's like also it's like, why would you buy tomatoes that look pretty? That's like, what's the point of that? I mean, other than growing them is kind of nice. But I really love Cherokee purple or any of the purple varieties too.
Yeah, that one's really good. I did one. It was kind of like a mushroom basket tomato. You've seen those ones. It's like I'll butcher the name. It's like Castellotto Genovese.
Yes.
But it does like a really wobbly, bumpy tomato, and they're about that size when they're full grown. So, like, for me, if I was making just a salad for myself, just one of those, I'd just cut that up, put the whole thing in a salad. But the flavor on them is really, really good.
I like small vegetables for when I want to make salads by myself.
Yeah.
Because then I hate to waste it. Like, I like small onions because it's like, who wants to wrap up half an onion and stick it in your refrigerator and it stinks of everything? That's like one of the, like, growing really big onions. I think, like, everything is more flavorful when it's small, but like obviously like the dollar point, it's better when they're big. A lot of people go for big stuff, but there's a lot of the older people in my community that like small onions, and I'm like, good, because there's areas that I don't like fertilize or water well enough or weed well enough, and then I get a bunch of little ones, and I'm like, there's good things for all that stuff. So, so let's talk about all the different ways that we can trellis tomatoes.
Yeah. So, tomato cages are what a lot of people think of, but honestly, if you take good care of your tomatoes, they're going to outgrow even the large tomato cages. So those are my, like, not even an option for me.
Really?
No, I don't even.
What I do is I'll put a T-post in the ground, and then I'll stack tomato cages on top of each other, so they're like 6 or 7 feet.
Yeah.
That's the only way.
Have to be that tall.
Unless they're determinate.
Yeah, determinants, like, when you're talking about tomatoes, there's determinate and indeterminate. And a determinate tomato is going to grow so tall and set all its fruit, and then it's just kind of done, Whereas an indeterminate is going to keep growing taller and taller and taller as long as you don't top it, like cut the tallest branch at the top. An indeterminate is just going to keep growing and getting taller. So in places where it's warm enough year-round to grow tomatoes, that's where you see the pictures of the guy on the ladder with a 15-foot tall tomato, like, because they can just get that tall if they're supported. They will just keep getting taller and taller. So for me, I do cattle panels, and I grew them all the way up the cattle panel wall and over the side, and then they were hanging back down. When I took them down for the year, I had about 8-9 foot tall tomato plants.
And the nice thing about paddle panels is they're like easy to install. They're easy to store. You know, I like put them up and take them down every year, and it's like a one-time investment that they're going to be.
They last a long time. Paddle panels are that's what I switched to, and that's what I will always do now.
But they're a little bit expensive.
Yeah.
You know, having a paddle, like, it's an investment.
It is.
I think I have 10, and I wish I had like more, but
yeah.
And then also, I think it's hard for people to get them home if they don't have a trailer. So like trying to figure out how to get one to your house.
Yeah.
Can be a tricky. So, and then we talked about the Florida weed, which if you are putting in a huge planting, like when you're thinking like 100-foot beds, the Florida weed is just like T-post, 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 and then you're just going around and around with string, and then you work your way up, where it's like labor intensive, but it's cost effective. Like, and it's...
Yeah, you're just using string to kind of weave back and forth, and then that string helps hold that tomato plant up and support it as it goes. You can use like a twine or like a nylon cord as the string for that, and then you're just securing it at the end of with the either stakes or T-posts on the end. Every so many feet, you'll have that hard support that's driven into the ground. And that's an option. It's just like, again, you can go as high as the T-posts go, and then at the top, they'll start flopping over and breaking.
And then also you can do the T-post, and then they have those T like pipe things that fit on the top, and then you can do like a pipe over the top, and then you would have a string, and then you stick the string to the ground, and you have a string coming down like this, and then you just like kind of train it to grow up that way. And people do that with cucumbers and tomatoes, and I've never done that, but it looks...
It's kind of like, I feel like that kind of came from how a lot of greenhouse growers will grow tomatoes. Is it called the high tie method?
I don't know the name.
The high tie. So like it kind of comes from the concept where if you're growing like a high tunnel or a greenhouse like this, you hang strings from the ceiling and then stake them into the ground right at the base of the tomato plants, and then they'll wrap their way up that string.
And that's like the lower and lean method, or something like that. And that's what all these strings in the greenhouse are for, because we used to grow tomatoes in here, and then with the lower and lean method, which is really effective in a greenhouse space to get the most plants in a tiny spot. But I like, we were talking about determinate and indeterminate, and like one of the things that I think is like if you're trying to can, like if your goal is to can a bunch of sauce, doing determinants and having them all ready at the same week, and then getting all your canning done, because one of the things I don't like about canning is small batch canning. So I'm like, I don't want to trash my kitchen and do all this work and then the water bathing and then just end up with like 4 jars. Like, okay, and then like a week later having to do that same thing. So when you plant determinate, all your tomatoes are ready at the same time, and then the plant's done. And that's kind of a good thing if you're trying to plant, or you're trying to can like crazy. And I kind of like the idea of doing that, putting in a later one. Like usually people are rushing to get their tomatoes in, but if you start your tomato seeds in June, you can still get
a harvest in fall.
Yeah, and then in the fall, your house, because when you can, it heats up your house. And it's like a hot job, and so it's like I like to think about canning. Like I like to put in a late planting of tomatoes so that I'm canning in October when it's not so hot and miserable to be like in the kitchen. So I think that's a good idea for planting and putting food up. I made about 200 jars of pickles, and they were all gross and slimy and too acidic. And it was like my first time, and I ended up with like so many cucumbers. I'm like, I gotta remove, and then they were terrible, and I have to like dump all those out. So I'm not canning though. I'm like, I never learned. Nobody ever taught me, so I just like learned on YouTube. And so far, I haven't like I can do the cowboy candy. That's an easy one. You guys do cowboy candy? Yeah. Everybody loves that, and it's great to take to a party.
Right. We do the cinnamon pickles too with the overripe cucumbers.
Really?
You do seed them, and it's like a 7-day process where you soak them in like red hot and then solution. And you drain the solution, and you have to bring it to a boil like every day for 5 days and pour the solution back onto the cucumbers. Interesting. So that's my kids' favorite. Like it's like their candy to them. They'll go get.
And that's a healthy treat. I love that.
When it comes to tomatoes too, there's determinate and indeterminate, which is how the plant itself grows. But if you're wanting to do sauces as well, you have to keep in mind you want some paste tomatoes. So your beefsteaks or slicers are going to have a really high water content, whereas a paste tomato is going to be like a meatier option and have less water in it that you
Marzanos. Last year, my San Marzanos, I think each plant gave me 25 pounds. I was so pleased with the amount.
Those ones are my least.
I know, people were saying that they taste bad, and I was like laughing because I don't think I ever tried them because I was so obsessed with my Dr. Weich's that those are the only tomatoes I ate. And they're like, oh, the flavor's bad, and I'm like, oh, but like for me, from a market perspective, they're like the old reliable, you know. But like I like Romas a lot.
Yeah, Romas are really good.
And I have Roma Bush over there on the table, which is like it's for canning. So.
Amish paste is probably my like absolute favorite paste tomato, just because they're a really like. If I'm like thinking if Roma is typically gonna be about that big, I get Amish paste like huge, and just the plants seem to be very sturdy and healthy. And the Amish paste is an indeterminate paste tomato, so it'll keep putting them on all year. I'm trying Gilberti tomatoes this year too. That's another paste one, and they're supposed to be comparable to Amish paste, where it's a bigger size fruit. I'm trying those ones as well, but it's more about for me. I don't know if it's just the way I was growing them. They just, I don't know, the plants just never performed super well, and they would, I feel like, get sick easier than other ones did. But Romas are kind of a good old faithful.
Yeah, people like them, know them, and recognize them. So that's an interesting thing when, from my marketing perspective, is that almost everybody wants a big red slicer, and I like the idea of growing a lot of like the different colors and the striped ones and like the really funky ones, but like people would be like, and then like I don't know what to do with that, you know. So I was like, okay, I got it. So I did about 1,000 Park Swapper, which we were reading like the ones that are like the top sellers in our area, and the Park Swapper outsold like everything. And so I started a whole bunch of those. Have you ever grown those before? No, I don't know. They're a hybrid. And then they are just like super crack resistant, disease resistant, you know, so that there's like less loss. So I'm gonna try those this year.
In the world of seeds too, you'll also hear things like hybrids and heirlooms. I typically will just do heirlooms in what I grow from, just because I want to know that I can save seed from them and that they're going to be exactly the same. When you get into hybrids, you may not be able to save seed from those and get exactly the same tomato the following year. Just gets into genetics.
Have you guys ever saved tomato seed?
It's really easy.
I thought it was hard. It was weird that I had this like mental block that I thought it'd be hard, and then it's like, no, it isn't. You just like easy. Put them in some water, and then that kind of ferments it.
Yeah, you have to ferment them to get they're encased in like a gel coating in the tomato seed or in the tomato, and the purpose of that is to have it
not sprout inside the tomato.
Not sprout inside the tomato, and then be protected when that seed is dropped. It allows it to be protected in the soil, and then the nature naturally gets that coating off, and then the tomato can sprout from that. But you have to get the coating off to save the seed from it and have it not mold in your storage. So you let them sit in water for like those 2 days.
Yeah.
Roughly. You just kind of walk by it. I leave a fermentation lid, like a ball fermentation lid, on my mason jar with them, and I just every time I walk past them in the kitchen, I just give them a little swirl, and that helps to get that gel coating off. And then you'll run them through like a mesh filter once the couple days are up, and then dry them on a paper towel or paper plate. Safe.
Yeah. And this year I was paying about 10 cents a seed for the tomatoes. So saving them is like it's easy to save like 100, and it's worth it.
Yeah.
Plus, there's so many seed saving events in our area, like the seed swaps, and saving seed and then sharing with other people. Just like how we were talking about earlier about the plants that you don't have that you want. It's like I had like 1,000 Dr. Weich's that I had saved last year, and it's like really easy for me to be like, oh, I have so many I can share, So
yeah, green beans. I have like a shoebox full of green bean seeds. I don't need to buy green bean seeds.
You save green bean seeds?
Yeah.
That seems tedious.
Yeah. It's not. Now I don't have to buy them. And I've done that. Like all the green beans I grew last year were from seeds I saved the year before.
Nice.
Sometimes it's not intentional. Like sometimes they just like go to seed. Like I just don't pick them soon enough.
Yeah.
And then they're too big to eat as green beans. So then I'm just like, well, those are going to be green bean seeds now.
Yeah.
But I haven't had to buy green bean seeds in a couple of years now.
What's your favorite green bean?
I like the Contender or the Provider beans. Now mine, and this is just my own fall. I plant all different green bean seeds all together, and so
have 60 days, so they're kind of a quick.
yeah, they're very fast.
And that's a nice thing for when you take out your spring crops. You know, to follow them with green beans. And so there's pole beans and there's bush beans, just how there's determinate and indeterminate. And then I think pole beans take longer to grow but produce longer. Mm-hmm. And then green beans, I think you can get 3 weeks of harvest before they're done. Mm-hmm. So it's like, that's another thing where we were talking about knowing when to pull it. You know, so like with your peas and your green beans, when production begins to decline, it's time to go. Because, you know, I always thought that like plant something, like when I first started, like cucumbers, and then they produce all season and that's the only cucumber, but really then I have about 3 weeks apart, and then like every 3 weeks, so it'll be like maybe 4 plantings a summer. Hello, ladies. You want to join our garden class? Okay, cool. Yeah.
Cucumbers are my like absolute, like next to tomatoes. I think everybody loves tomatoes, but garden fresh cucumbers are my absolute favorite thing to grow. They're super easy. Like I think they're easy. Some people say they're hard, but I just grow them vertically on a A-frame trellis, and they're just, I don't know, they're easy.
What's your varieties that you like to grow?
I like the muncher cucumber because I eat them fresh a lot. Like cucumbers, I didn't even really know this until I started learning more about vegetables, but they have so much nutrition in them. Like they're great if you get like tired in the afternoon. A lot of people will like reach for like a cup of coffee or a soda in the afternoon. If you eat a cucumber, it will wake you up. Like they're just so good and so full of nutrition.
One that too. It's really good flavor. It's so good for you.
Yeah, I like the muncher one. That one's really good. I did the Space Master 80.
Yeah, I almost always exclusively plant Space Master bush because they don't take up a lot of space and they produce really heavy. And so if you have a garden, like you know, I have my rows are 30 inches wide with a 18-inch walk path, so I don't want to have cucumbers going everywhere. I barely ever trellis cucumbers because I prioritize my trellising for my tomatoes.
Yeah.
So I let them sprawl, and Space Master bushes are like an old reliable. Because I try to do like the Berkless ones, and I think those flavor wise they're the best, but I had less success with that. And then Armenian cucumbers are like a cross between muskmelon and cucumbers. So I call them like cucumber melon. Do you remember like in the early 2000s when we were all wearing cucumber melon smelling things? Reminds me of my sister. Like, you know. But they grow 18 inches is when you harvest them, so they're huge and they're like ribs. So when you slice them, they're like cool shapes. But they remain sweet even when it's really hot out. So they have like a cucumber, but they're kind of sweet. But it's like when like last summer, we had like so many 90-degree days and it was so dry, and I like a lot of my cucumbers were bitter and people were complaining about them, and then I was like really embarrassed. I'm like, I can't taste test all these to tell you if they're like good or not. But I was like, but the Armenian cucumbers are like the flavor like remains good throughout the year. So.
I love garden cucumbers. That's my favorite thing. Like as soon as those are ready, I'm like, I'm back in garden season. It's my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. And then do you succession plant your cucumbers?
I will typically do like 2 harvests of them in a summer. I'll do one that I put out in like late spring, very early summer, and then I'll do another set that'll go in like July, and then sometimes August I'll get that second set in.
That's what I think is so great about planting a big spring crop is like if you get in like at the beginning of March and have your some of that stuff in your garden, then when those things are done, that's your empty spot to put in your succession summer stuff. So like I have a hard time saving room because I go so big in my spring crops because it's like it's nice weather and I'm like motivated and I'm excited to be in the garden. And I know that like as summer goes on and as it gets hotter, like my ambition and my desire to be out and with the bugs and everything, it goes downhill. So I like try to start really strong, but then I worry about not having space for my summer stuff, you know, because everybody can't wait for Mother's Day to like get all their heat loving things in. And then I kind of panic because I don't have space, and that's why I made 2 new gardens this year. I have like an extra half acre than before. But the nice thing about doing spring crops like peas and like those short term like the broccoli and things is that when that stuff comes out, then you have that second succession. So then you're still harvesting, you know, into late summer, into fall when it cools down, when it's good to can, and then you're like making the most of your garden space. Because I think when I started, I used to be so excited to start seeds. And then all my things would grow so huge, and then I would get them in before it was warm enough. And then it's like if you put in your tomatoes when it's still in the, you know, like the really low 40s or 30s, high 30s at night, it causes damage and it affects the root production all summer long. So it's like when you jump the gun on that kind of stuff, when you stress out that plant, like you're saying, it sends off signals to bugs to come in and eat your plants. And so like waiting that time, but it's so hard when you're just, oh my gosh, you just want to get in the garden and you start with heat loving things, you know. And that's a hard lesson to learn. Is not getting too.
I don't put my peppers out until like June.
Really?
Yeah, like I don't even put them in the ground until June. Usually, just because if those experience cold, like below 60 degrees, they stunt so bad, and they just take so long to recover from that. That I've just learned like I've had better harvests and bigger harvests sooner the years that I wait till June to put them out. You know, like there's years where I've put them out in, you know, our last frost date's April 23rd. There's years I put them out in April, and I get horrible harvest. Whereas when I wait until June, if I dedicate space, like right now I'm just resting a bed to be ready to put peppers in June.
Yeah.
So then when it's time, I'll have a space ready to go. I don't have to wait for anything else to come out. But I get a better harvest just by waiting until June to even get those things outside.
One time I heard an analogy that it's like your summer crops are in a sundress and you don't want them to be shivering in a sundress. So if you don't want to be in a sundress outside in the garden or late in the, you know, in the night or in the early morning, then you don't want your, you know, sundress little peppers to be shivering, you know, but like our peas and everything, they're in like their big winter jacket and they're like comfortable in those kinds of weathers. Ladies, you're welcome to wander. You can walk through our class.
Yeah, I'm enjoying listening.
Oh, good, yeah.
Would you like a chair?
Yeah, I was like, you guys can join us for sure. But yeah, so something else I wanted to say about nighttime. Oh, soil temperatures. So it's like, you know, we're having days in the high 70s and the 80s, and it makes a lot of people like think that it's like time, but really it's the soil temperature. And I always Google Lafayette County soil temperature, and I watch my soil temperatures, and like different things like to grow at different soil temperatures. So it's like tomatoes are fine at like 55 degrees, yet like your cucumbers, your melons, and your peppers want like 65 degrees, and like your watermelon really wants it to be like, you know, 75 degrees. And so tomatoes are a little bit more forgiving than a lot of other of the summer crops, and so that's usually one of my first ones. And I don't know about like the ground cherries and like.
I've never grown ground cherries.
God, I'm so excited about ground cherries. I made a whole table, and I was hoping that that I get to take so many of them home.
Yeah.
But and then like basil is such a like it's so easy to grow. So it's like if you're a beginner, you know, it's a plant it and forget it, and then you just like go through there and pop off the seeds heads, you know, and then it'll get bushier and bushier and bushier. And I have up there, I've got like the purple, I've got lemon basil, and then just like sweet basil. But I love lemon basil like in my salad. Mm-hmm. And if you put it in the ground next to your tomatoes, you're gonna have better flavored tomatoes. Mm-hmm. And they're companions, so it's like you grab a tomato, then you grab your basil, and then you've got spaghetti sauce or whatever pasta dish that you want to do. And then I think that my basil always grows better if it's in some shade. You know, it doesn't, because it's full sun, it's not going to get as like lush and green. And so usually I put it like in the shade of the tomato plants, you know, however the sun comes, you know, I try to like stick them in there underneath stuff as like a companion plant. And they need a lot of water though. They need regular watering. They're not as forgiving as tomatoes, because tomatoes want to get watered very deeply once a week, an inch, you know. Whereas like the basil, you know, if you want it to be the best, you could just water it every other day or whatever. But at the end of the season, I just hang it up upside down in the garage, and then I just save it like as the full leaves in my pantry. And then if you crush them, then you get that really fresh summer basil aroma, better than like grinding it up, you know. But it's like so much better than store bought. So, and I think it does okay. Like it's like a house plant and like a windowsill or something. Like it's pretty. But it's an herb that is really easy to grow, and that I think like all beginner gardeners. It's got a home in my garden forever.
Yeah, it's an easy one to fit in, and it's pretty.
And seed saving is really easy because when you hang it up upside down in the garage, then the lower half is all the seeds, and then I just, you know, sprinkle them on, and that's how I got all my basil. And like also, I think the seeds have a long shelf life. So I have had the same, you know, I think those are 5 years old that I used this year, and they all germinated. So.
Yeah.
What other herbs do you love to grow?
I'm not an herb.
I'm not an herb person either. I like rosemary's hard.
Yeah, my problem is herbs end up being like an afterthought for me. I tend to like not give them dedicated space, and then I'll just like, oh, let me stick something in here that, you know, an herb will go good here, and it never does. I had Brett build me an herb planter, and then he did like the where he wanted it to go in our yard. There's no water, so I would have to haul buckets of water across the yard to tend
hard.
to it, and then they just get neglected and they would die.
People always be like, why don't you have flowers at your roadside stand? I'm like, that'd be really cute, except I'm carrying jugs of water there, and I'm like, and then they die. And then I used to try to have pick your own basil at the farm stand, because I thought, oh my gosh, how nice would it be to have fresh herbs that like the people want to come. And then one time I had a big basil plant, and I had like basil $2. Somebody took my big pot, took the thing, and for $2. Took the whole thing because I don't think I understood that they should just break some off, like, and whatever. But that's the old joy of the honor system, is that sometimes there's not enough communication. I'm not very good about putting all the details, but and then cilantro.
Like a lot of people want to do the salsa garden, and what's tricky with that is you need cilantro, but cilantro is a cool weather crop.
Right.
So for me, like I'll grow a ton of cilantro in the early spring, and until it starts to go to seed. Usually come by like June, you're done growing cilantro. But then your tomatoes and your onions and your garlic that you need for the salsa too isn't ready till later in the summer. So I freeze my cilantro.
Like in olive oil?
No, like I just wash it and freeze it.
Hey, like never done that.
Yeah, and then like when you're ready to use it, you just, you know, I like throw my bag at the countertop a couple times and it'll break up, and then you just sprinkle it in. But I'm literally still cooking with cilantro I froze last year in the summer.
I need to do that. Do you see all my cilantro?
You can do that with dill too. Because dill, again, like dill's a little bit cooler weather herb. I'm not good at growing dill, but you need dill for pickles.
Right.
But your pickles, your cucumbers, your pickles aren't ready till later. You can do the same thing with dill. You just wash it and freeze it.
So that's a good thing to think about ahead of time. I dedicate a bed to cilantro and treat it as a perennial because it goes to seed, and like as we know, as coriander, you know, it's the seed. But when it's green coriander, that's something that is like a delicacy that you can only find in the garden. But I don't know how to cook with green coriander. Do you?
No.
Okay, so neither do I. I tried to market it to chefs, and they're like, "What would I do with it?" And I was like, "I don't cook. I just grow food. like that's your job. You need to figure out how to use it." But the nice thing about cilantro is that it attracts so many beneficial insects to your garden, and like the beneficial wasps or whatever that. And then it's like, so cilantro is like this when you want to harvest it, and then it gets to be like this tall, and then it drops the seeds everywhere. Those seeds that germinate in the fall overwinter, and I grew cilantro in my garden unprotected over winter, and now it's like thriving. And so I just try to like let wherever I plant it, I like leave it there because it volunteers like crazy and it's everywhere. It's kind of a good companion for tomatoes. I think it helps with the beneficial insects. And so like usually I just like leave that bed, be like, okay, like this is cilantro, and cilantro lives here, and nobody else gets to live here. But then it'll self seed so thick that you have a lot of it. And I love it like January running outside and getting cilantro. Like it looks a little bit like frostbitten, you know, sometimes, but it bounces right back. And now I have like a lush, really thick, you know, this tall of cilantro, and I've got like 50 feet, and nobody buys it. I don't know why I grow so much cilantro. I love it though.
Yeah,
but maybe I need to start freezing it.
Yeah, I just freeze it in the bags. Like I have my cilantro.
Dill does the same thing, that it self seeds, and it'll always volunteer back in that same spot. So if you could dedicate a spot in your garden to these different herbs, that they're gonna drop their seed and.
A lot of them, like a lot of herbs are perennial. They're, at least here in Missouri, they are, and they will.
Chives. I love chives.
Stay year round.
You ever made chive flour, like vinaigrette or whatever?
I've never done chives.
Really?
I just put chives in my herb planter. I made Brett move their planter, so this year I can actually
water
tend to it. And
I'm obsessed with alliums, though.
Yeah, I would say you are. You're the allium queen.
Yeah.
So
I'm like everything. Garlic, onions. I did shallots this year for the first time. And they're coming up. They look really good. I'm excited. A shallot's kind of like a cross between a garlic and onion, and that I'm interested to see it grow because I don't know when to harvest it. I'm gonna have to Google that later.
Yeah.
When do I look to harvest it? Kels, do you know? No.
No.
They're.
I assume it's probably similar to like an onion or garlic.
Yeah.
Probably when that like neck gets starts to crop over kind of thing.
Yeah. The nice thing is that they are expensive. Shallots are, and so it's like I always have to think like however many feet that I have to weed and water and care for, the most money that I can get out of that space is how I need to organize my garden, which is so different than the way most gardeners think. But I've never home gardened. I've always market gardened. So like my perception of like how to grow things is so different. And like I have a hard time like being like switching my thoughts around. But I'm like bed foot buys. I'm like I need $8 a bed foot. So those ones are. People ask for them though. And then like, can you braid them? You don't know.
I never grew them. No.
I like onion braids and garlic braids in the kitchen because it looks like really cottage core, like very like homegrown. I sold a bunch of onion braids last year, but then like they dry down and then they look really good when they're green.
How do you cure your onions and garlic?
When they're ready, so it's like when your onions, half of them flop over, that's the sign that they're done. And onions go based on day length. So like the amount of hours of sun, then they start to go. So then you just like break the rest of their necks down and like let them lose a lot of their moisture in the ground. And I had some issues with sun scald because like they bulb up above ground and then sometimes the sun gets them. So I like to get them out and then I have the bulb and then I lay them like this so that the bulb is covered but the green is on top of them. And then lay that out for like 2 or 3 days, as long as there's no rain. And that'll dry them down a lot. And then I take them into the shed and I have like a big high-powered fan. And and you can like bunch in like 10 and hang, and then I'll like daisy chain them. Every year I cure them. I do have a different strategy, and some work better than others. Like I've done the cattle panel like this, and then just like tie them to the cattle panels, and then put a fan in the middle. Yeah. And that one works pretty good. So many steps.
So many steps. But for long-term storage, curing your onions once you get to pull those is a really important thing. And then do you find that certain onions don't cure as well as others for storage? Like yellow onions for me don't seem to cure well, but whites do.
Yeah, white. Last year, all my white onions turned green because I put them in the shop where there's a lot of sunlight still, and the sun hit them, and then because the sun hit them, they turned green, and then I couldn't sell them. But what I did is I just put them in the back in the garden, and put compost over the top, and now they're like green onions for this year because like if you put an old onion in the garden, it turns into 3 spring onions. So then I'm at least getting my use out of them. But yeah, so like there's different kinds of onions, and they have different shelf life. And like the sweet onions that you get. Trying to be better about cultivating. How do you deal with weeds?
So being in the raised beds, I'm at a point now where this many years and I have very little weed pressure because I've got a foot of soil on top of cardboard. Like I just don't have much pressure for weeds. I get some little like grass and little things, and so I just try. When I go out in the early morning in the summertime, I will pull weeds like little ones, as small as they are, and if I can get them when they're small, then they don't become a problem later.
That's the key.
Yeah, is to
start weeding now.
Yeah, if you can get them when they're small, like I literally just sit and look at the soil and it's like, oh, that's a tiny little green spot, and just pull it out. Keeping it really, like keeping the soil covered too helps me to keep weed pressure down, because you just,
with mulch.
Yeah, I do a lot with mulch, so that I'm not dealing with having to pull weeds out of the raised beds all summer. But that's one of the things with raised beds. It's an investment to get started, but then now I don't face much weed pressure at all. It's very easy to keep my garden, and I can focus on things like pruning and plant health versus pulling weeds and trying to keep my walkways and things like that.
Yeah. I use my broad fork, and it has 4 tines, and that's how I do my spacing. So I broad fork holes like this, and then I put my plants in like that. So then I have, gaps, and then I have a big hoe, and then I have a little hoe for like, as the plants grow. So then if like once a week, if I can get in there and do like because you want to chop them even before they come up. So like if the weeds are germinating, but like when they're just in their first true leaves, or like before their true leaves come up, you want to whack them when they're really little. Also, I have a hori knife, which I think every gardener should have. And it's like a knife, but it's also like a trowel. But I'll just like, cut them. And then like I have a lot of dandelions in my garden because I keep mulch, and those are like things with really big tap roots are really the only things that can survive in my method. And so then I'll like stab them in the center.
Yeah, I think the thing too is if you do get big weeds, to dig down as deep as you can and get as much of the roots as you can. I have a handy dandy little trowel that's got a knife on one side and stuff like that, and that
because if you just chop the top, then it's just like a band-aid.
Yeah. So I just dig down as deep as I can and try to pull all the roots out, and then throw whatever I pull to my chickens.
Right. My chickens are so happy when I bring them weeds. It helps me want to weed, because I'm like, here, look at all the weeds for you guys. They're so happy to get them.
Eat the bugs and eat everything off of it. So, and then I'm not putting weeds into my compost too. Then I just feed it to the chickens, and by the time they're done with it, they're not gonna, I take the chicken manure and put that into the compost, but then I'm not putting just straight weeds that could just turn around and find their home in a compost.
But I always save my newspapers, and then like you have your plants, and then you can just like put newspapers all around, and then put something to hold them down. I think when I first started, I tried sand, because some YouTube show, but I don't add sand to my garden at all anymore. People all the time were like, "You need to add sand." I'm like, "What's that going to do?" There's no nutrients in that. There's not. It's not really doing it. And like mixing hard clay soil with sand is just going to make it even harder eventually. So compost on top, and wood chips, straw, hay, grass clippings.
All those are good mulches. They say Mother Nature is modest, and she likes to be covered up. If you don't plant something or cover the soil, something else will plant itself there. Mother Nature will find a way to cover the soil for you. And so by covering it with mulch, you kind of prevent the opportunity for more weeds and things like that to come in place. So either plant something or cover it. Yes, Mother Nature's modest.
I'm laughing at myself because I was really excited about, I had put leaves down in the garden, and I was so proud of it. Oh, these are so light, I can carry them, I can dump them out. And then they blew away in the windstorm, and they're gone. Like I did all these rows with the leaves, and I was like, this looks so good. And then like blew away, and then I even like sat on them and stepped on them, and now
Brett has just accepted that there's just going to be straw all over our yard now, because I mulch with a lot of straw. Or like my garlic when I plant it, I mulch it with like pine bedding, like animal bedding. But that stuff just blows away, so you have to keep putting it on. I will like pre-dampen it before I put it on, because if you're trying to mulch on a windy day, having your mulch be damp is a little bit helpful.
Right.
But no, like he's just accepted that there's going to be straw and pine bedding shavings all over our yard. Like it's just going to be that way. And it's not hurting anything.
But I am a huge fan of cardboard, laying that down and then just cutting a hole and putting my plant and then never having to leave. That's the best. But finding enough cardboard is a hard is. We used to have the recycling bin in Concordia, and I used to dumpster dive like every other day. But it's like not efficient to like drive around looking for cardboard. We did that, drive around, and then it gets old fast.
Yeah.
And then I called the Spice Factory, and we got pallet loads like that they bind together. So now you have like enough cardboard for life, which has its pros and cons because windy days when it's flying around.
Yeah.
That's another thing where you're like the husband has to just accept that there's cardboard blowing all over. I'm like, sorry neighbors, sorry. I'm gonna give you guys free tomatoes. Yeah, but did we cover? Do you guys have any
Questions or anything you want to go over? Anything you want to know about growing?
I would like to be successful at cantaloupe. Do you have any advice for that?
So I do that on a trellis too.
You do?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to tie them up?
No. You will put it, so I do like an A-frame trellis that's, probably about that big roughly. It's rebar mesh. Before I had cattle panels, I would buy rebar mesh like in the hardware section. So it's a smaller option, but it's essentially the same thing. It's a little bit less sturdy. So like I did watermelon on it one year, and I've got one trellis that's got a nice little arch to it from the weight of a 13-pound watermelon, but smaller melons are super easy to grow on there. I'll plant 2 or 3 plants at the base of my trellis, and then as they start to get bigger, you will train them up the trellis. You'll just kind of leave them a little bit. Every once in a while, I'll go through and kind of rework them, but they'll put out little curly tendrils, just like cucumbers, stuff like that do, that will grab onto the trellis and hold it on there. I don't have to tie them at all. I just kind of gently train them initially, and then they hang on.
One time I made tomato cages. This is a funny story. You can laugh at me if you want. One time I made tomato cages out of it was like mesh fencing. And I was like, this is so great, get it up. And then I realized when it was time to pick the tomatoes that I couldn't stick my hand in, nor could I get the tomatoes out. And then I'm like,
trying to get them in.
Trying to get it out, but I couldn't get to my tomatoes, and I was like, what was I thinking?
Yeah, the personal melons you can grow on the trellises like that. You can grow bigger ones too, or like sugar pie pumpkins are really easy to grow on a trellis as well, and get them up and off the ground to help airflow around the plants. I think the biggest thing in summer gardening is airflow and trying to prevent disease.
Yeah.
The better I trellis and prune my tomatoes, the healthier they stay, the longer that I can grow the same original plants without them getting sick. So I try.
Have you ever vertically grown your zucchini?
That I have not. Every time I've tried zucchini, I think I have harvested a grand total of 3 zucchini because of squash bugs.
Yeah.
I just lose the plants too early and don't. But those I've had people use tomato cages to grow a zucchini and just kind of trellis it up.
Yeah, and then you if you this goes for most garden plants. If you cut off the leaves below the lowest fruit, then because those are like old, and then it's like when you have squash bugs, they're laying their eggs on those sick, dying leaves, and so you just burn them. Get rid of them and burn them.
Yeah.
And then you were saying that you have a shop vac that you suck bugs up with, which I think is brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because squishing them, I hate squishing. When I see a squash bug, I always try to kill it, but then my fingers stink, and then I'm like, ew.
Yeah, and you can do the tape thing, like you can wrap your hand with duct tape and just walk around and get them, or pull the eggs off with duct tape. But
and the nymphs.
But yeah, no, I taught my kids how to shop back up squash bugs, like what they look like, and then we just fill up the shop vac tub with squash bugs. I dump in some water and some dish soap, and they all die. But
that is the best way to organically garden, because I try to be. My neighbor has beehives, and I want his bees there, and like we have a very mutually beneficial relationship because I have so much flowering things, and his bees are all over my garden. So I'm like, I never want to do anything that's going to kill the bees, but it's hard to put pesticides on, and to be dealing with the bad bugs and also respecting the life of the bees. So it's like when you put pesticides on, is it at nighttime?
Typically at nighttime.
Because then the bees are in bed.
And I'll try to not put anything on the flowers. Like if I'm going to sprinkle diatomaceous earth, I will put that more on like the base of the plant or the leaves versus the flowers, because the bees are going for the flowers. So you don't want to put diatomaceous earth on there.
Yeah.
But typically I do it late in the evening after the bees have gone to bed, and use pesticides and things like that. And I do all organic ones.
One time I got so mad at those squash bugs, I bought liquid sippin', and I bought it. And I was like, I have this, and I never used it. I have like a couple of different pesticides that I've never used. But I was like, I would though. I would, you know, because it's hard. Because it's like it's knowing what to do, catching it soon enough before you lose your whole crop, or just bulldozing the crop.
I just pulled all my squash out. Like I put 3 squash plants in. All of them were just decimated, and I just pulled them, and I was like, I'm done growing squash for the rest of the year. Like,
yeah, and you definitely don't want to have a squash bed. You want to hide. Here's a squash. Yeah. Over here's a squash, and like that doesn't make sense for me when I'm trying to harvest for market. But it 100% is worth it because
gardening
yeah, to hide squash all over the place, you know.
And it's kind of like that with anything, like interplanting or like not putting all of the same vegetable together. So then if there's bugs over here, they may not find the ones over there. So then you don't lose all of that vegetable to pests. You may just lose the ones that were over here. So like I did a whole bed of peppers, but then I had a few more peppers that like my spring stuff wasn't out of the way for yet. So I had to plant them somewhere else. Well, I had some kind of like a leaf cutter or something come through and literally just eat all of the leaves off of this whole bed of peppers over here.
Which is crazy because usually peppers don't get much pest
No,
pressure.
they don't. And I had something just literally just destroy almost all of my peppers. And I went through and cut them off. Eventually they recovered. But I had put 3 pepper plants over in my strawberry bed where I had some gaps just to get them in the ground. And I had 0 pest damage over here. They never found them. So interplanting things and kind of having them be all over the place is a really good strategy to kind of confuse the pests or throw them off a little bit.
Yeah. And then the nasturtiums is a trap crop, and it prevents the bean that eats the beans, your green beans. So I'm going to put this year, I'm putting nasturtiums. Plus they taste good. They're like kind of peppery, and I'm going to try to offer some salad mixes for my early spring veggies, and I love the idea of having some edible flowers like in my salad mixes.
Yeah, borage is a good companion plant.
I love borage. It's so beautiful too.
Yeah.
Tastes so good.
And marigolds are another good one that helps with depression pests. So I interplant a lot of marigolds around my garden. I'll do peppers in a row of marigolds and peppers around marigolds just because it attracts the bees. Bees love marigolds. I have them sleep on the marigolds all in my garden all the time.
Yeah. I think that's a common mistake where people have like their flower garden and then they have their vegetable garden. But the more that you can like interplant all of those things, that's like the way that nature is. You know, it's like you don't find the monocrop. So it's like the more that you can just mimic nature, like how you're saying, and like covering the earth. And then like at the bottom of forests, it's like leaf litter and all this, you know, and it's nothing's watering or fertilizing these trees and they're growing huge. So I like always try to add, you know, like I add compost or add leaves or add grass clippings. And so that's kind of creating.
I just focus on like biodiversity, as many different varieties as I can put in my garden, all the different things. Like if you're market gardening, unless you're like really growing a lot of each one, it may not make sense to grow 16 varieties of tomatoes, but I grow 16 to 20 varieties every single year. But the diversity that brings to my garden, I think really is beneficial. And plus it's fun. I like pretty, you know, I grow something pretty. It has to taste good for it to stay in my garden more than a year. But
yeah,
you want to.
I'm a sucker for everything purple. I want purple everything. That's when they sell so many of those purple green beans and stuff. I'm like,
ooh. I want all the colors of things. I think you know, you want your garden to be both functional, like you want it to have a purpose, but then also be beautiful. Because if it's not somewhere that you like to be, that's not visually appealing to you, you're not going to want to be out there. But if you can build a space that's both functionally and beautiful, I think that's really
a great way to be artistically expressive too, and creative.
Yeah.
That's like I'm building a mandala garden because in farming we plant straight lines. But I'm trying to build this mandala garden because I love the idea of like having, you know, that it's like the energy is like flowing and like my different beds are like different shapes. I went in there today, that's where all my mushrooms are fruiting. And so I'm like looking for mushrooms every morning, and then I'm like finding a lot of snakes. And it's like funny because I'll be like, mushroom, you know, a snake.
That is the one thing. I'm like, need some wood to pop on here, but
there has many snakes in your garden.
I have never had a snake in my garden.
Really? I have like a 6-foot black snake, resident snake, and I'm always like, oh hey girl, good to see you again. Like trying not to be scared of her because I know she's my friend. Yeah. But I have like the little ones that I'm just like, oh, okay, little friend. But
I'm sure they could probably get up in the raised beds, but if they have been in my raised beds, I don't know
too.
Before I start to put my hand in, I like peek around because there's like a little ridge where they could very easily be.
Yeah.
Like when I clean the coop out, I do the deep litter method, so I don't have to clean it out very often. But when I clean it out, I'm always like looking like up in the rafters, like just to make sure that there's not a little
snakes and
in
trees. I don't use a snake in eye level.
Yeah. No.
You had some in your house.
Yeah, we have lots of snakes.
My mom is so afraid of snakes, and she always comes to visit me like at this time of year when there's like the snapping turtles and the snakes, and they're all like breeding right now or whatever. But she like gets so scared, and I'm really scared when they're like under 9 feet. Anyway, I think are we good?
Yeah.
You guys got any questions, comments? All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. You know.